In the past week, President Biden announced he's running for another term in the White House. Trump and Biden again, it's a showdown for election 2024. Plus, the national topics of guns and cultural wars, how those issues impact us here at home. Only on Michigan Chronicle News Now.
So joining us to talk about this race again, here we are, is former state legislator and current Troy School Board member Sherry Gator-Yogo joins us. Also, political strategist Wayne Bradley joins us as well. The numbers don't look kind for either of these candidates. I mean, it's like deja vu all over again to 2016, or rather 2020 for Biden and Trump. First, let's talk and get the perspective of what Detroiters think about this race between Trump and Biden. We took to the streets. Let's take a look.
We have so much more going on that's above Biden and Trump. They are just the faces.
No, Trump needs to go somewhere and hide.
Nothing that I can get behind.
I definitely don't want to see Trump run again.
And why so? Is Biden a better choice for you? Why so?
Biden is okay, but Trump is just terrible as a person too.
Oh man, love Biden, literally. I actually started off as a Trumper simply because, we needed them certain excerpts of capitalism in America, but yet and still his buffoonness overexerted his more or less attitude in a sense. So I changed myself to a Biden guy. Notice how he did so good with Ukraine, keeping up that democracy. I'm in love with that brother.
All the presidents always get the good things from the last president. You know what I'm saying? Like how black people was like, Obama didn't do nothing for us. You know how much he tried? You know what I'm saying? The House was full of Republicans. Y'all didn't vote for the Republicans. You know what I mean? Y'all didn't vote for the Democrats to help Obama do stuff. So he's doing what he can.
More work to be done on our city, on our nation, and they're just the faces. They're just names.
Biden and Trump, it's Biden for
Trump
you?
shouldn't even be in it.
And why so? Do you think Biden's a better choice for the economy? Or?
Well, of course that, but because of what Trump is caught up in.
All right, so recent NBC News poll has Biden with a 38% seeing him in a positive light. That's 38% of Americans, 48% seeing him in a negative light. Now, 34, that's compared to 34% that see Trump in a positive light and 53% that see him in a negative light, definitely in a deficit compared to Biden. But neither of these candidates have any good poll ratings, if you will. Sherry, what says you about where we are?
So, I certainly was hopeful that we would see some more cream rise to the top. Mm-hmm. We know that the age of both of these candidates is two of the most senior candidates we would ever see running for president. I think that we need some fresh, new energy infused in the party to ignite the base, and a candidate that can actually unite the country. We know the leadership of both Trump and President Biden is totally different styles. I have to say that President Trump has helped to create a divisiveness and charge up a base of almost zealots in a number of ways. And I think he's helped to fracture his own party. I will say personally, I like some of the things that I've seen with respect to criminal justice reform coming out of President Trump's party, or his leadership, I should say, or his presidency. And I would like to see President Biden do a little bit more than call for a resolution on the decriminalization of marijuana.
But does Biden deserve or has earned another 4 years or another term?
I was hopeful to see some fresh new energy. Mm-hmm. I think right now I got my eye on Robert Kennedy. I was hoping maybe our governor would have taken that leap to see her run. I think she could have made some impact.
So now you're bringing up other candidates in the Democratic Party.
Yes.
Against your own office holder.
Well, I mean, I'm an American. And while I am a Democrat, I believe that this is the time where we should have honest dialogue and conversations about the best candidate to win the office of president, I just see the numbers are a bit tanked for President Biden, and I'm not sure that he'll get people out in record numbers to really make sure that we take it home.
Wayne, what says your reaction to these poll numbers, to this deja vu race here all over again, 2020?
You know, as I'm listening to Sherry, I feel somewhat the same way about my own party and our candidates. Obviously, President Trump right now is the leading recipient of votes in polls. It shows 70%, which I think is pretty high. I think for a while we were looking at Governor DeSantis as that alternative to President Trump, but he's been getting himself caught in so many other mishaps lately that he is, damaging his own chances. And even
Are you talking about like the cultural stances he's taking in Florida?
Republicans have always been at the forefront of culture battles and culture wars, but I mean, he's going after Disney at this point. And I think that does not help, in a national perspective. Maybe down there in Florida that might play well, but I think that he was really the person I think a lot of people were looking to as the alternative. And he's kind of, in my estimation, he's tried to bring up his Trump street cred by doing all these different things, and it's hurting his chances right now.
Where does this yield the 2024 race in the end? Because most people see that despite the legal ramifications for Trump right now, it seems as if he's going to press on and be the 2024 the political party leader. Same for Biden. How does this shape up in 2020 now that you have, or 2024 now that you have Biden with a record?
I have to salute him on making sure that we address the college loan issue that is finally been passed, to make sure that we address all the debt that many Americans have from just going to get a 4-year education, a higher education.
So the courts, it's been held up in the courts.
Yes, well, I believe they've pushed on forward and really taken that to the finish line. And so I celebrate that. And I think that's going to help with a number of young voters. But the recent poll that I saw by young voters had President Biden at about 34%.
And why is that? When you look at the different issues at play, the economy and the inflation that contributes to that, when you look at just so many of the domestic policy, people don't feel safe. You look at the Republican Party, and they continue to talk about the border being open, foreign policy with Ukraine. So, China policy. You put all that together, and how does one manage all of these different moving parts, if you will?
I think that's probably right now one of the things that, if I had a real big criticism of Biden, has been the way he's handled some more of the foreign policy and how that is affecting us and the value of our dollar now. You're starting to see a lot of countries coming together.
Yes.
And they're going to weaken our dollar. To me, that's war on America, not a lot of these other things. I think Republicans, it's a strange time right now to see us fighting to not want to defend Ukraine and taking Russia's side on that issue. So that, again, these are kind of like the strange times of our foreign policy. But I think the difference is when you look at it from a world perspective, people were fearful maybe a little bit more of Donald Trump and retribution that would come, he felt crossed politically. And I don't think that these world leaders right now, I don't think they really respect Joe Biden that way. And I think that's, something to look at from a global standpoint.
For most American people, they care about what's in their pocketbook. And how does this race impact pocketbook issues when certainly when you look at the online comments and Biden announcing he's going to run for another term, you can see it flood on social media when he came out with his campaign video saying we've got to finish the job. What does that mean to you in finishing the job?
Finishing the job is really addressing criminal justice reform from a national perspective. I've continued to lift up the fact that we have a number of citizens in the state of Michigan who've been incarcerated due to marijuana laws that if they were to do the same offense now, they would not be locked up. And so I was very hopeful that our president would take the torch and address this, from a national perspective. And what he did was punt it to the states to address it across the country. And I think if we're going to be serious about addressing the issues of how African Americans especially are disproportionately been incarcerated, this was one of the key areas where we could have addressed some of the issues. You know,
You don't seem sold on a Biden candidacy.
She's actually tougher on than I am.
Well, I mean, I'm just being forthright and sharing the issues that are before us. I mean, I don't just wave the banner just because it's a part of my party. I think that we want to see efforts, policies that really address the conditions of African American people, and that's not just the president's leadership, but that's in our state as well. We want to see, now that we have a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, a Democratic governor, we want to see policies that move forward. Where everybody's up in arms when they hear what DeSantis says about African American studies or critical race theory. But what are we doing here in Michigan? Are we going to make sure that my former bill moves through the House and the Senate to make sure that we do implement African American studies in Michigan's merit curriculum? Are we going to make sure that we address the unfair and disproportionate amount of African Americans that are incarcerated due to marijuana laws that have been changed?
Well, those things can happen when you have
Happen and should and must happen.
When you have now the Democratic Party that is leading both in the governor's office and also on both sides of the legislature. So
yes,
we're going to get to legislative policy in the state in just a moment, because coming up we're going to talk about a little gun reform, gun control and gun rights. But to Wayne, to wrap up the political front and where you see 2024, Biden or Trump?
It's really rough to say either one of those gentlemen right now. I'd like to see both of them actually make it to their primary, but right now I don't see Trump being able to beat Biden, to be quite honest. I just think that he has a certain amount of Republican voters, and that's it. He's not going to get the independent voters like he did the first time around.
Right.
Hillary Clinton. He's lost a large portion of the woman vote. Suburban, the house moms, they call them, soccer moms have left Donald Trump.
The white women vote.
Well, that's that was
he didn't have ours. It was the white women vote.
See, this is the thing. I think that Trump did speak to a certain amount of us.
I would say young African American males.
Definitely.
He certainly, that's still a phenomenon to me, but a number of.
I think it came from the hip hop. He was highly revered in hip hop before he decided to run for office. Every rapper I can think of said they wanted to be like Donald Trump, which was successful, have money, women and all that. So I think that is where it resonates with black men more than it might do with any other part of our population. But I think that overall it's going to be very hard for him to win a general election.
But when you look at the 2020 election and how Trump lost a lot of different segments of the voting pop, you also had the Democrats playing the hand very conveniently and smartly to have people vote by mail, and all the different other measures and how people were more conveniently able to vote during the pandemic era, right? And I think that's perhaps a strategy. How do Republicans try to mirror that effort? Because you have some circles saying, you know what, we can't wait until election day. We've got to compete and earn these votes a little more earlier, right?
Unfortunately, I don't see the effort to mirror those efforts. I see an effort to make sure that doesn't happen again. That would be my answer.
That's the party of restricting the vote.
Well,
we try to get out the vote. They try to restrict the vote.
I just think that, in these situations, yes, I don't think that they're going to. That's probably their plan more, is to make sure those vote, it's not as easy.
Outreach.
Yeah. But I think outreach is going out and delivering the message. And I think that the message has been all over the place. Until we focus more on jobs and economy, like I said, like right now, it's almost like going back to the late 1990s, early 2000s. We're talking about transgender stuff. And again, in the Black community, that's not really one of our main issues. And I think a lot of, Christians and folks would agree with that. But at the same time, we're not going to make our voting decision based off that one thing.
And I want to dig into that a little bit more, because I think sometimes it's an uncomfortable conversation to have. But that's the one area in the Democratic Party that I think they embrace and almost put on a pedestal. And it's almost become the symbol for civil rights. And the issues of African Americans have somewhat taken a back seat to that.
Are you talking about LGBTQ.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so and I applaud the work that's been done with the Elliott Larson's Act and so on, and all the rights that's been afforded. But we can't be dismissive of the plight of African American people, the work that we've done in this country, the struggle that we've had, and the rights that need to be lifted up. I tell my colleagues, and I've said this when I was in the House, it's great to wave the banner and literally the flag of the LGBTQ community, but equally be willing to wave the flag of African American people. And that's not always the issue. And I think that's where sometimes we lose the conservative Democrats, the pastors and churchgoers and faith leaders, etc. They may not come out in verbal opposition to the party, but those issues matter to them. And in some instances, it pushes them closer to a candidate like Trump that may not necessarily be the uniter that they want to see, but
he stands on the issue.
He said right, but he's away from the issues that in many instances that they see are offensive or non-Christian,
But
etc.
when you look at civil rights and Black issues, I mean, there's still the George Floyd policing act that's yet to be passed, and that's some criticism that from the Black community, Biden, or in some Democrats, the criticism that they get from out of the Black community as well. And just briefly to wrap up the 2024 race, what's going to be different this time around is, people may see this as a repeat of the 2020 with the Biden and Trump race here. What's interesting is that the pandemic isn't where it was, like it was in 2020, where most candidates had a campaign virtually. So it's going to be interesting to see how Biden gets out on the stump this time around. And it's also going to be interesting to see how voters put up these two candidates now that Biden has a record. Because when Biden ran initially, his record was his time as vice president and his time in the Senate. But now he served as president, and again, I see you're not so enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopefully optimistic, but I mean, I would have liked to see an opportunity for some more youth on the field.
All right.
I'm in the same boat on that in terms of just wanting to hear a different voice. A generation. My thing is that these people are creating laws and creating policy that most of them will not be around to see how it really affects, our kids and grandkids. So.
Let's talk about policies and laws that are getting passed from the state level. There's all this talk about gun control versus gun rights, especially in light of the shootings in recent, days, weeks, months. We keep coming back to mass shootings, school shootings, the everyday violent crime and shootings here in our urban communities. So how do we address it? Is it limiting the access to people with guns? Is it like what the state is doing from a legislative perspective, coming up with red flag laws? I mean, the state here in Michigan has really been progressive now that Democrats control both sides of the legislature and also the governorship. What says you as a former state legislator?
So certainly.
Wayne is waiting to go in on this.
I know he clings to his Second Amendment rights, and certainly we are not trying to.
What'd you say, Wayne?
My guns and my Bible.
Guns and Bible. We're not trying to infringe on that, but I grapple with making sure that we create an environment where families can live, can thrive, can walk the streets without the danger of being shot, And I realize in a lot of instances that a number of the shootings that are taking place are not by your traditional licensed gun carriers. But I also realize that there are a number of instances where with the school shootings, the mass shootings, that we do have to have systems in place like red flag laws that have been enacted in a number of our states. And we're one of the last states to come on board with addressing the mental health crisis. Now, just having a law in and of itself is not going to solve the problem. But I think we have to, as leaders, develop policies that put a procedure in place, put our courts in place, a law enforcement in place, and systems to check on people who have expressed, some form of mental challenge in ways that people can, report that. And so they shouldn't have access to weapons and guns.
I want to bring Wayne in here. Wayne, does there need to be more laws when it comes to guns?
Well, I think the thing that I'm going to say is first, those laws that they're proposing would not have stopped the shooting in Oakland Township. Okay. What you need, and I went to Mumford High School, what you need in schools is armed officers at every school. Like that should be the beginning. If you want to create a law, if you want to put some money to help fund something, take retired veterans, retired police officers, and let them patrol these schools. Now, the difference is that in the suburbs, they have these campus style schools. So it's just more wide open. But I went to a school, we had metal detectors and police right there at the front door. There were no mass shootings ever at Mumford High School or any DPS school that I'm aware of.
That's right.
And so I think that's the first thing that we need to look at is putting armed security at each school. Now,
yeah.
And then the second thing is maybe give the teachers an option if they want to get training. Because, the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
I think that's probably where you lost Sherry.
Well, as
a former
option.
teacher, what do you think about
As
that?
an option.
Yeah, and just recently having one of DPS teachers who had a weapon, unlicensed, albeit, I believe. That's wrong. I shared that with Chief Craig previously. We've debated that issue. I just think there are too many things that can happen when you're in a classroom. When you're teaching, we're not just sitting down teaching. We're up, we're moving. A student might have an emergency, a fight might break out. There are too many situations that can occur and a weapon becomes exposed. Even if you put it in a desk, there's too many dynamics in a school that
teachers should just be focused on teaching.
And so I will say I fully support. And when I served in the legislature, I had a bill that would really make sure that our data infrastructure is like almost archaic, unfortunately. Be it our lien system, understanding how many schools out of all of our 500 plus districts actually have school resource officers. Now, the one thing that DPS has its own police force, but every district doesn't have that. Right. And in some school districts, they don't even have ample school resource officers. So you see that, I think it was in Chicago and another state where when an armed gunman came into the school, it was a school resource officer that helped to foil, their plan, et cetera. So in order to make sure that our schools are safe, there's no one size fit all approach, as he talked about the different infrastructure of our schools. But I just thought it was incumbent upon us to know which schools have SROs, school resource officers, and which ones don't. And I was ashamed to learn in 2018 that we didn't know. Yeah. So so those are the things that are necessary on our school campuses. Another thing is the way that we pay people, and that could be a whole nother show. From our educators, the people that are actually in the schools and the classrooms, the paraprofessionals, you name it, the deans of students, et cetera. But the security officers are in many instances woefully underpaid.
And getting to the gun issue, even outside of the schools, one would say, okay, we need more laws, or we need to enforce the laws that's currently on the books, or let's now get to the root cause, because there's always the after effect on what we should do about guns, whether it's limiting access or providing more access to people who want to defend themselves. But in getting to the root cause, it can't just only be the gun.
No, it's not.
And you mentioned mental health.
Yeah.
But some people would say, well, it's conflict resolution. It's I know when I was in public school, I grew up with a conflict resolution class. I became a peer mediator who try to resolve conflicts amongst your peers before you get sent to the principal's office. And then it's just also cultural household dynamics
when you're talking about that
and values.
And this is the thing that's frustrating, because when you're talking about that, you're talking about streets. What goes on conflict resolution. But the only time we start really talking about these gun laws again is we have these mass shootings in schools, right? And so to me, those are two almost separate issues, right? Because the access that people have, Chicago, for example, has some of the tightest, most restricted gun laws in America. And it just does not work. People have access to guns, but those are two different school shootings, kids.
But people, whether it's young people or adults, they're quickly able to get access to a gun to try to resolve conflict. I think that's the sticking point.
Well, you start looking at video games, the music we listen to. There's a lot of different.
And that's the conversation as far as
factors.
contributing factors and root causes. How do we start to address those things? Because, whatever the root cause is, the gun is always seems to be the remedy that people want to find to resolve conflict.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a surge of outrage, and I think it's the value system. And so this is the conservative part of me, or the Christian part of me, that says,
Wayne likes
that right. That's why I wore red for him today.
I appreciate that.
I was raised in church, and some of the behaviors that we see even in our schools, I wouldn't dare bulk up in the face of a teacher, a principal, a janitor, a lunch lady, but that's commonplace now.
You saw the student who
that has a lot to do with
the telephones. I think the telephones are going to have to get left out of the classroom, because at one point I was like, well, I like to hold my phone too, and I think students can use phones as a learning tool, calculator,
or distraction.
But they are a huge distraction. I was at an event at a local college. I won't say which one. So, but a college student was speaking to one of our high school seniors, and I had to stop the conversation to address a couple of our students while the college student was talking about her experience getting scholarships, filling out FAFSA. The high school students, just like in their phones, just like this, and I'm like, that's rude. That's rude. You are not giving any eye contact. Now, I take notes on my phone from time to time. I may be answering a constituent matter, but these are students, and you're there with other students and resources so it's like a value system. No, right, exactly. It's like a value or a lack thereof that I'm starting to see really expand. And so that lack of respect, it starts there. The lack of respect for adults, the lack of respect for your peers, the lack of respect for any adult, that I have the right to push you when I'm walking down the street. I have the right to shove you,
shoot you,
or to shoot. And that's where it is if we don't start
sometimes
teaching.
right in front of the police. I mean, we have the
It's
council member,
it's crazy.
Mary Waters, who's introducing or is entertaining the idea of wanting an ordinance that would create for gun-free zones downtown while working with the state legislature to do so. Wayne?
We have gun-free zones all over the city of Detroit now at schools. It does not work. Criminals don't follow the law. I mean, that just does not, those things don't work. And the bottom line is downtown, when people are drinking all night and, if they get to their car, that's where again, they might not bring it into the establishment, but if they get back to their car, you're not going to tell someone that's driving around Detroit at night, they can't bring their gun into this area. So I just think that's going to do is create more legal problems for Detroit residents and probably other visitors in this area as well.
Well, I have to applaud Councilmember Waters for, thinking through this. I watched her discussing this in the media, and I felt a very maternal instinct to say enough is enough. And I think more of that is going to happen with all of our leadership, to let people know that while it may not necessarily be a gun-free zone, but the message that enough is enough. We care about what happens to you, but you don't have the right to disturb the freedom, the safety of other citizens. And so we're going to have to get to the root causes earlier in our schools, bringing us back to a place of values, and how African Americans have been reared by our foremothers and forefathers and grandparents and so on, to have a center of respect. And in some instances, that's going to have to be to talk to some of their parents as well. And you get in a free public education. It's not free if you decide to allow your child to have any kind of behavior that creates this tension and this almost vitriol and hate towards each other. We got to bring it back.
And I'm sure Wayne would say
there's no laws to legislate morality.
And I would say to that point, and I'll let you pick up the final word here, that you would probably say in counter to that it isn't free or freedom for our guns to be controlled or taken away.
I just don't like the idea of a couple bad apples get to mess it up for everybody. That's what it comes down to.
It's more of a bushel, a few bushel.
A couple bushels should not mess up the whole vineyard, the whole orchard. Then, if that's the case,
Right.
I just don't like the idea of creating laws that criminals are not going to follow anyway, and it's going to make it harder for legitimate, law-abiding citizens to have access to the things they need to protect themselves.
This will be an ongoing conversation.
Yes. To be continued.
To be continued. Sherry Wayne, thank you so much for being here on MC News Now. Appreciate it. God have you back.
Anytime.
Thank you for inviting me.
And that wraps up this edition of Michigan Chronicle News Now.